So you're all very welcome to this session of Communities of Practice. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is nature-based solutions for optimizing community mental health and social well-being during and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we've seen is that there's been a major impact in terms of people's mental health, a deterioration in mental health as a result of the stresses of the last year and 4 months of the pandemic. And we need to look at new ways of thinking, new ways of working, innovation in this area. So we're delighted to be joined by a fantastic panelist of speakers. So I'm just going to introduce them briefly, and then they will discuss their topic for 5 minutes, and then we will go into an open panelist discussion of questions, and then we will have about 15 minutes at the end for open questions and answers. So please, as we are talking and going through the session, if there's any questions you have, just put them in the questions and answers section. And just wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded, and the recording will be available from the 5th of July. And also, there's a poll that we're looking at in terms of nature-based enterprises. So maybe if you can complete that poll as well, that would be fantastic. So just going to introduce the speakers. So I'm going to be the chair for the session. So I'm Shirley Gleeson. I'm the director and founder of Eco-Wellness Consulting and Nador Centre for Integrative Forest Therapy. And I'm also the community ambassador for the health and wellbeing community here for nature-based solutions. We have Professor Miles Richardson joining us from the University of Derby, and Miles is the Professor of Human Factors and Nature Connectedness. So we're delighted to welcome Miles. We also have Dr. Katarzyna Semenko. She's a psychiatrist from Poland, from the Forest Therapy Center in Poland. So you're very welcome, Katarzyna. And we have Dr. Pamela Furman, co-founder of Conscious Leadership Institute and Anima Mundi Project. And Pamela is based between the US and the Netherlands. And we have Diarmuid McCurry. And Diarmuid is a member of the UN ECE ILO team of specialists in green jobs in the forestry sector. And he's also the director of Crown Trees for Ireland. So you can see we have a really good mix in terms of research, practice, leadership, green jobs development. So we hope you will enjoy the session. So I will hand it over to Professor Miles to give the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Shirley. I shall just share my screen here. Welcome to all those joining us. There we go. And select the correct view. So I'm assuming people can see that. Let me know if you can't.
Miles, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. It's nice to have the confirmation. Yeah, so Professor Miles Richardson from the University of Derby. I lead the Nature Connectedness research group there. You can follow our work on the web or via my blog and on social media. And very briefly, a quick whiz through. I think that the warming climate, the loss of wildlife show that our relationship with the natural world is failing, and that has consequences for our mental health too. So nature connectedness is a internationally recognized psychological construct that describes our sense of relationship with nature. So it's different to timing and visits to nature. It's about our relationship with nature. And it's measurable. We can measure it with psychometric scales. We've found that we can improve it and change it. And the fact that we can measure it allows us to do some science and some research. So it provides some interesting perspectives on the whole area of people's relationship to the natural world and well-being. And that science allows us to find things like this. So the relationship with nature dips during adolescence. Perhaps not surprising to hear, but that's something that we found in the UK, in Australia, Canada, and China as well. And the levels of our nature connectedness are probably lower than we need for a sustainable relationship with the natural world, both for human and nature's well-being. So nature connectedness matters. Not the topic for today, but it matters because people who are more connected to nature do more for nature, higher levels of pro-environmental and pro-nature conservation behaviours, worth keeping in mind. And in terms of people and in mental health, broadly, nature connectedness is related to two areas of mental well-being: feeling good and functioning well. Some examples around the screen there. And the key thing that we've been finding over the last couple of years is that nature connectedness explains well-being to a higher level than benchmarks such as socioeconomic status, 4 times more than socioeconomic status, and it's a better measure than nature visits. Quite often it's easy to measure time and visits to nature, and that relates to well-being, but if you put nature connectedness into those models, it comes out as a better explainer of people's well-being and mental health. And just a bit on noticing nature in the lockdown. We've focused on noticing nature because it's noticing nature that builds nature connectedness. We've found in the UK, most people don't notice nature, sadly. And during the lockdown, we did a national survey and we found that it was the increase in noticing nature rather than the increase in nature visits, which there was a lot of increase in nature visits during the lockdown, but it was the increase in noticing nature that explained higher levels of mental well-being. And in other national surveys, we found similar, that it's nature connectedness and noticing rather than simple time in nature that predicts mental well-being. And nature connectedness is turning into a core psychological need. A basic need for human well-being is having a close relationship with the natural world. And that's seen included in the revised Gallup World Poll, for the World Wellbeing Poll last year. So how do we increase nature connectedness rather than focus on time and visits? That's a lot of work that we've been doing, and we've found through prompting people to notice nature. So we simply prompted people to notice nature, in one example using a smartphone, and people who recorded the good things they saw in nature, we found significant and sustained increases in mental health and nature connectedness, which reached clinical significance for people with mental health difficulties. And we've also developed pathways to nature connectedness so people can design their own programs by tapping in to those pathways. And they've been used in the UK by the big organisations such as the National Trust, 30 Days Wild. They've been used very widely as well in various places, from the design of programs to the design of places as well. So in summary, close relationship with nature is important for well-being and pro-nature behaviours. It can be targeted and improved, and create moments to notice and engage using the pathways to nature connectedness. And thanks very much. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Fantastic, Professor Miles. And just to say that we're really inspired by all the work they're doing at the research unit in University of Derby, and we've trained guides and practitioners all over the world using the pathways to nature connection, and they really work well across culture. So thanks very much for that, Miles. So now we'll hear from Dr. Katarzyna, psychiatrist in Poland. So welcome, Katarzyna.
Hello, it's very nice to meet you. I would like to share you some of my practice during pandemic because for all this time I worked as a doctor, as a psychiatrist in outpatients clinic, but also I guided forest bathing walks. So I had two-side perspective of what is happening with our emotions and with our need to contact with nature. And first of all, from my clinic, I observed many more anxiety and depression disorder. And it was not only fear about our physical health. I mean, immune system, is it strong enough? Or anxiety about our relatives. But also it was connected to general lockdown. cannot have normal connections with their friends. They couldn't go outside, so they spent a lot of time in one place, and they walk through the internet. So, for example, having school through the internet was very stressful for some young people, and there were more and more cases of social phobia. Or on the other hand, young people were like, they didn't need to contact other people because they got used to it somehow. So they were closed in a small space, and they were afraid of being infected by other people in an urban environment. They needed to wear masks, so they didn't feel like comfortable, and they were in very prolonged stress. And living in a big city, they were somehow cut off the soothing stimuli like nature sounds, nature smells, and some nice landscapes. And during the pandemic, we started to observe that contact with nature seemed to be very supportive, because it helped in dealing with the stressors mentioned above. The forest environment increases immunity. But this is one thing. Another thing is when you think about it and when you are aware that it's helping you, your stress level is getting lower. So in this case, not only patients were stronger in immune way, but also this contact with nature had positive effect on the level of anxiety. The other thing was it is a less infectious space. It's more safe than, for example, city center or supermarket. So people could go there, feel pretty safe, and have social relationships in a pretty safe way. In Poland, we didn't need to in the forest. So people could have something like, I would say, holiday from apocalypse, because they went to the forest and they felt like it didn't happen, like this pandemic is somewhere around, but not in nature. So you can observe that natural rhythms are active, that we are not in danger, that probably nobody would come close and infect us. And it was the only perspective for normal surrounding for social relationships for people from big cities who had no gardens, no green spaces. And it was very important, not only for adult people, but also for children, for seniors, for older people. So it was like this. And surrounding provides soothing stimuli. So it was positive impact on our physical stress level, but also mental, psychological stress level. And from the perspective of guide, I met people during my walks who needed prevention, who wanted more strong, immunology, to face the virus and maybe take care more about themselves and be stronger. But also totally different group, people who actually had COVID and wanted to be more relaxed. They were looking for some strength, some power in nature, and it was like rehabilitation. So these two groups, people under big stress from all these social stressors who needed rest, like holiday from all this stress. So they also used to and what else? So people went there and they felt like, okay, this would end, this pandemic would end, and we will have normal world again. So it was helpful in this way. And social relationships, very important thing. And belonging to the network of many species in the forest was felt lonely before. Their houses, their flats, when they went to nature, they feel so lonely. So it was also helpful this way. And I think this is very important to have not only strict protection reserves, but also suburban forests. Easy to get by bike, by car, walk even, and just to find easy way This place is safe because it's not too wild, so it doesn't produce anxiety. For example, I will meet a wolf and what will happen. It's safe, it's easy to access, and people can use it whenever they want to. It's for free. I think these cities, which were close to the forest areas, were pretty lucky cities, because a lot of people could go to nature, have rest, strengthen their immune system, and it was helpful when we talked after forest bathing, or when I talked to patients. They really were like nature hubs, so it's very good, cheap, for free actually, and it's very, very supporting. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Katarzyna. So it's great to see that the forests were seen as safe spaces and restorative environments for the people that needed it most during the pandemic. So there's a lot of information there, even in relation to the whole concept of forest medicine and the different components in the natural environment that helps boost immune functioning and reduce stress levels. So thank you for that, Katarzyna. So next up we have Dr. Pamela Fioran, and she's going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation. So you're very welcome, Pamela.
Oh, thank you very much. I'd like to share a bit about what continues to be reinforced in my theoretical research and work with leaders and organizations. And that is how integrating personal development with deepening one's relationship with nature leads to the level of maturity needed to address the challenges of building a sustainable future. Next, please. Fundamentally, what I'm speaking to is a value and wisdom-based transformation, which is nurtured by the way in which one perceives and understands self, and self in relationship to a larger holistic paradigm, and holds the potential to foster a shift in the work of leadership and the role of business. Next. This work comprises of gaining a holistic view and expanding perceptions of self, relatedness, and accessing holistic wisdom. With this, there's a connecting to self, others, and the planet, and fundamentally building awareness and understanding in terms of one's underlying assumptions, one's gifts, their values, their purpose, interpersonal intelligence, collaboration, and co-creation, demonstrating authentic care, and holding a systemic, holistic, and strategic focus that emerges through sustainable productivity, community concerns, or a focus in Earth-life systems. Next, please. Practice that support building these connections through accessing the wisdom within and around us, connecting with something larger than oneself, and gaining awareness of one's place in the web of life, and nourishing holistic health and well-being. Next. Some examples include autobiographical work, yoga, self-observation and reflection, immersive experiences, 360 assessment and feedback, and quite pointedly, direct engagement with and learning from nature. Next. I find that these practices support movement through 3 phases: an exploration phase, which expands our orientation beyond our standard paradigm; a reassessment, which may involve a paradigm shift or a confirmation; and integration, which can impact anywhere from how one makes meaning of their experiences, to how they design policies, to how they perceive the role of leaders in business. Next, please. Examples, and just to name a few, of leaders and organizations that I engage with involve moving from task to outcome, bringing one's whole self to work, building a learning organization, or focusing on purpose-based work. And I'd like to delve into one of these a little further, and that is prioritizing holistic health and well-being. Next, please. We can see organizations and their teams enacting this through sponsoring nature-based experiences, setting priorities, especially during the time of the pandemic, to focus on the well-being of team members and the communities, holding open conversations on mental health, integrating well-being practices into their work and meetings, and modeling balanced and flexible work hours. Next, please. Within their communities, we found, especially during the pandemic, organizations fostering community-driven and work-hour-held initiatives, such as helping schools set up their IT networks for virtual classrooms, or assisting in beekeeping, or enhancing the income opportunity, qualities of lives, and safeties of suppliers within their value chains. Next, please. At a planetary or global level, we can see business and leaders as vehicles for systemic change through their own social ecological project and services, through regenerative models, and pointedly through the third example here, forming systemic change-based organizations or movements. Here I pull from two examples, such as Tree Sisters and Grupos, who are working to make restoration, conservation, and community the new normal. Next, please. Through deeper connection with self, others, and nature, we hold potential alliance to align leadership with flourishing organizations, communities, and ecosystems. And with that, I thank you.
Many thanks for that, Pamela. And it's great to see that level of intervention in terms of that international leadership development. And I think maybe Dermot, if you just mute yourself for a minute thanks, Dermot. I suppose we heard earlier from John Bell in terms of the need for transformational change and transformational thinking. And I think Pamela really is at the cutting edge of that work in terms of her work with global leadership. So fantastic. So now I'll hand you over to Dermot McAree. So Dermot.
Thanks, Shirley, and good morning, everybody, from a sunny and bright Dublin, where I'm delighted to say all the trees are actively photosynthesizing, releasing their carbon and releasing their oxygen and absorbing their CO2 emissions. So I think an ideal nature-based solution to climate change. That's by way of introduction. Now, I've been involved on screen there. You see the end result of an exciting project. In fact, one of the most satisfying and rewarding projects that I've been involved with in my career. This was a booklet that we produced. I'm a member of a team of specialists in the United Nations, ECE ILO group, and we've been working there for some years, and we decided we'd investigate the entire potential of green forest jobs. This is the book that we've produced. I'll be emphasizing the areas of forest ecotherapy and forest therapy, which has fantastic potential for job creation. Now, we believe that nature-based solutions are the engines to drive the growth of sustainable economic green jobs. I think it's been said before, they offer really significant potential to deliver on the ambitions of the EU, the Green Deal, the recovery plan that's been announced by Ursula von der Leyen in the EU, and of course, it'll help to implement the UN SDGs, I think there are 17 sustainable development goals. Now, before I go on, I should emphasize or should define what a green forest job is. We decided keep it simple, we decided the best definition was a green forest job. It complies with the principles of sustainable forest management. In other words, it is economically viable, it's socially acceptable, and environmentally sound. So the jobs that are generated in the whole forest ecotherapy, forest therapy business comply with the criteria for sustainable forest management. These jobs contribute to the green economy and are involved in the manufacture of forest products, sustainable forest products, and in the performance of ecosystem services. Now, our group, this booklet is 72 pages, and I'd recommend it to everybody to read. It outlines in more detail than I'm speaking about, but it's available, and I'll give the reference on the web. Now, in our group, we identified 7 main thematic areas where there was great job creation, green forest job creation potential. I'll go through them briefly. We had forest management, inventory and planning. We had social and urban development, agroforestry and mountain forestry, wood and energy production, education and research. We found that in research, there were good take-home messages that anything that can be derived from fossil fuels can now be derived from cellulose, the building block of photosynthesis. The other area we had was biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. But the one that you're most interested in is health and recreation. And I use the word recreation, recreating ourselves. Now, specifically in relation to health and recreation, we thought there was great scope and opportunities in the forest ecotherapy area for more evidence-based studies and for the training of suitable personnel, particularly in the forest interpretation and guide and forest therapy professionals. I think we emphasized there should be a basic understanding of the forest ecosystem with these guides. In other words, they should understand the ecological cycle in terms of the producers, the consumers, the decomposers, and the very exciting wood wide web. But this is a fundamental understanding of the forest ecosystem, which is important. Now, using the forest effectively in health promotion, we feel could contribute to reducing public health care budgets. There's enormous cost for public health budgets. So we think with the green prescription, we could create new sources of income by creating green jobs in this area. We feel that forest ecotherapy theory and practice courses or modules are not featured on the curriculum of most forestry schools and university. This needs to be addressed. We may discuss this later. We also feel that these educational and practical training courses should be provided to help develop new skill sets which will be required by a new cohort of forest professionals. It was said earlier, as an antidote to modern stressful and unhealthy lifestyles, the demand for recreation, I use the word recreation, and nature-based ecotourism activities within forest has increased rapidly over the past few years. Again, an area of fantastic potential for the creation of green jobs. So with this in mind, the goal of forest recreation and ecotherapy should be to select, maintain and develop forest areas to provide quality outdoor experiences for all forest ecotherapy users. Now, in conclusion, we feel that the provision of these recreational and amenity services has considerable potential to generate sustainable green jobs and contribute to local economies. We can discuss this later on. So I will have the booklet, it's the reference there, and I would advise, it's 75 pages, but very well worthwhile reading. And the chapter on forest ecotherapy and nature connectedness is there. And I see a fantastic potential for job creation in this area. And COVID, if anything, has proven to me that there is a demand and even a requirement for the intervention of jobs in this area. So thank you.
Fantastic, Diarmuid. Thanks a million. And what I've done is I've put that booklet, the link in the chat section if anyone wants to see that. So you might just mute yourself for the moment again, Diarmuid, just to, that would be fantastic. So I think what Diarmuid was talking about is very important in terms of trying to integrate these practices, these nature-based solution practices like forest bathing, forest therapy, forest ecotherapy into the education system, and also an area of interest that I have is integrating it into the health system. And I think for that we need to have a credible, competent and professionally trained nature-based practitioners that we can receive funding for, and that the health systems will accept the nature-based solutions under the umbrella of green prescriptions to enhance not just positive mental health, but physical health and social well-being as well. So I might just to make a suggestion again, if any of the audience has any questions at this time, just to put them into the questions and answers, and we can get to them towards the end. And also we have a poll, our first poll, an audience poll. So maybe Ben, you could put the poll is there, I think. 1 second. Great. So the first poll is, so if you just want to maybe go to polls and you can answer the question. The question is simply, where is the greatest need or investment in nature-based solutions for mental health and well-being? We took a life span approach. So we just want to see in terms of, is it children, adolescents, adults, or older adults? So if you want to interact with the poll, complete the poll, that's fantastic. So maybe we will get all the speakers now to turn on the cameras, and we just have some questions for the panelists. It'd be fantastic. Great. Great. So I think the first question is, you know, how can nature-based solutions such as forest bathing, forest therapy, ecotherapy support people's mental health and well-being during and beyond the pandemic? So I will just open it up to the speakers and maybe see who wants to answer that question.
Maybe I can start from my perspective. This is very important in lowering the level of anxiety, and I mean stress in a physical way, like cortisol level, like blood pressure, heart rate, but also psychological. The second thing would be our immunology, because we are becoming more and more immune in contact with forest environment, and we have good research that can confirm it. And the other thing would be a place for social interactions, which are very important for our mental health. And lack of social interaction means another stressor. So we need to meet. We are like animals which live in a pack. We need to meet each other. And a forest provides soothing stimuli as well. So we can have a break from our stress. We can just relax, and we can let the forest act as a remedy. Of course, it is not, instead of antidepressants or instead of psychotherapy. This is something different, but it's like third very important option, and I think very well accessible, and we can use it as much as we want.
Great. Thank you, Katarzyna. And I just want to comment that it's great to see the medical practitioners, especially doctors and psychiatrists, championing this work, because I think that's where it needs to come from in terms of the health systems. So anybody else? Yes, Dermot?
Yeah, that was a point I was going to make in relation to that we should get the medical profession more involved. I like the idea of the green prescription, but I don't think it has been embraced quite uniformly by the medical profession. And I'd like to maybe hear the views of some people about do they know any practicing doctors who are actively prescribing the green prescription? I've seen a lot of this. I've spoken to people, especially about COVID anxiety, and I hate to say it, but quite a lot of them were prescribed tranquilizers and antidepressants, and the others who were aware of forest ecotherapy derived fantastic benefit by a stroll in the forest and getting in touch with their five senses. So again, to answer your question, I think we could improve the whole area by trying to get the medical profession more involved, actively involved, by prescribing, but I use the word, the green prescription. I'm not saying that conventional medical methods should be forgotten, but it should be complementary. And I think that would be a great antidote to the COVID problems that Katarzyna has spoken about earlier.
Thank you, Dermot. So that it's in conjunction with rather than instead of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you. Miles, yes?
Yeah, I think just following on from that, there are green social prescribing nature prescription pilots in the UK, but I think a big issue is that nature doesn't feature in our mainstream models of health and well-being, and people don't see nature as an everyday essential for managing their well-being. So I think in answer to the question, yes, things like forest bathing and forest therapy and green exercise can support health and social well-being, but it needs to be seen by both health professionals and the public as a solution, and it needs to be an everyday solution as well. It can't just be a part-time thing where we might have to go off to a certain location or a forest, for example, that we can, it's seen as an everyday solution and people have got access to it from their doorsteps in urban areas, etc. And I think there's quite a long way to go on that side of things.
Thanks, Miles. And that brings us into the next question around the challenges. You know, is it awareness, the lack of awareness? Is it lack of funding? Is it lack of research? Is it, you know, what barriers are in place? So maybe what the panelists would see as the challenges to scaling up these nature-based solutions to the communities that need it most. As Miles mentioned, the concept of, you know, nearby nature, integrating nature practice into day-to-day life, not simply getting in a bus and going a number of hours away to a really special place, but to access nature on the doorstep. So any thoughts from the panelists in terms of the challenges and maybe how we can start addressing some of these challenges?
I'll start because I kind of built I'll build on my previous answer about it not being in our models of health and well-being. I think that's one key change. But as a researcher, I'll always say there's a need for more evidence, but I think there is a need for more randomized controlled trials that convince some of the people that need to be convinced about this is a legitimate way to go. I think it is a legitimate way to go, but having robust randomized controlled trials of the therapies nature-based therapies that are on offer is necessary. And there is research out there, but it needs to reach the kind of levels of clinical trial type research that we do for pharmaceutical interventions, for example.
Thanks, Miles. And I think those that are interested in the whole area of funding around nature-based therapies for health and well-being, you can join us tomorrow morning for a session around the Horizon funding, the 2022 calls on funding for developing the research and evidence base around this practice. So thanks, Miles. So any other panelists want to? Yes, Dermot, and then we'll come to Pamela. Okay.
Yeah, well, what I did say, I think one of the major constraints is the lack of training in the universities, and it's not, you know, I did mention it in my quick presentation that I felt that the whole concept of forest bathing and forest ecotherapy theory and practice courses or modules are not generally part of forestry schools or university training. And I think I'm involved as a part-time university lecturer and external examiner, and it's something I'm trying to pursue in Ireland, to integrate the whole area and concept of forest ecotherapy into the forestry degree program, and also into a lot of other degree programs in universities. And then I think from there will be a greater acceptance of the concept of the green prescription, of the whole benefits of forest ecotherapy and ecotherapy.
We might come to Pamela now.
Yes, I think to build on something that Miles was saying, as well as generally speaking from a leadership or organizational perspective, the challenge is recognizing the need to incorporate engagement and learning from nature for well-being. And COVID was really a flashpoint on this, and not returning back to normal will be critical. And by not returning back to normal, I mean going into old habits around priorities, timelines, and business drivers, but really keeping with the priority around health and well-being.
Fantastic, Pamela. So I think it's great to see that COVID-19 has brought such interest in the area, but we have a long way to go, and also we have to consider the cultural differences, you know, across community engagement as well. It's not one size fits all. So I might just check in terms of the outcome of the poll. I don't know, Ben, if we can see those results in relation to the first poll. And we will go on to another question just while we're waiting for the poll. So just to ask the panelists, I think we've mentioned a few examples earlier, but are there any examples of nature-based solutions in your community that are addressing positive health and well-being at the moment? I know Diarmuid is involved locally. I don't know, Diarmuid, if you want to say a little bit about the work you're doing.
Richard, just briefly, I'm involved with an organisation called Crown Trees for Ireland, and our objective is to get people involved in planting and promoting planting the right tree in the right place. And I'm also involved with, uniquely in Ireland, there's an organisation called the Tidy Towns Group, and this is right throughout Ireland, where people are encouraged to beautify their towns by engaging in all types of activities like biodiversity enhancement and cleaning up and litter and graffiti and tree planting. So in Shankill, where I live, it's a community of about 13,000 people. We decided that we would set up a group called Trees for All, the magic molecule, and we would plant 13,000 trees, one tree for everybody in Shankill. We achieved that, and at the moment we're at 20,000. We're ahead of the posse. So the benefits of this, I found, were incredible. We got people engaged while they were planting trees. This has been going on for the last 5 years. And as they planted trees, we engaged with each other. It was literally an exercise in community engagement. And the benefits were such that there was great cooperation. It fostered a sense of well-being, belonging, and pride in our local area. Also, this project, which we call Trees for All, is now going nationwide, and it's been copied by other Tidy Towns group in Ireland. And the end result is that we are creating a thriving, carbon sequestering, biodiverse landscape that's, if you like, it's enriched with flora and fauna. So that's where I see, on a personal view, I've got great satisfaction from doing this, and it's embraced all the elements of community engagement and, you know, people with something to do, positive, and no better thing than we said that plant or grow your share of fresh air, plant a tree, and engage with looking at the magic molecule, this chlorophyll, this green material, and the feedback we've got has been fantastic. So that's a project that I took great delight in. We're still involved. We call it Trees for All. Go to your local village, find out what the population is, 560 people, plant 560 trees, and have that as the objective, one tree for everybody in the village or in your city. So that's a personal experience I was involved with, Shirley, and I must say it's...
Thank you, Diarmuid. And I see the poll results are back. Diarmuid, if you just want to mute yourself there.
Sorry.
Yeah, great, no problem. The poll results are back. It's actually very interesting that people think that the greatest need in terms of the investment for nature-based solutions are for adolescents and children, almost 3/4. Very interesting, you know, in terms of that result. So I might just check with the other panelists if they want to share any case study of best practice in terms of nature-based solutions in their area. Yes, Miles? Yeah.
Yeah, quickly share. I think there's specific therapeutic approaches which are quite exciting, and there's obviously many of those, and taking different approaches to the solutions that they offer. But I think one thing I'd just like to mention is the design of large-scale campaigns in the UK, such as 30 Days Wild, that was run by the Wildlife Trust, and 1 million people have taken part over the past 5 years. And I think that offers some exciting insights to what can happen in terms of the people who took part, improve their mental well-being and also their care for nature. But on the other side, it mainly engaged people already interested with nature, and it was predominantly of the males. And I think it just highlights what can happen when we engage people on a large scale, but there's very much a need to reach out to the non-nature lovers, the people who aren't already engaged. And I think that's the big challenge, which brings us back to the models of health and well-being, and just it being an everyday fact of life that nature's good for us.
Fantastic, Miles, and I'll just share a couple of examples from my perspective. We've just come back from training Scottish Forestry, which is the Scottish Government Department for Forestry Policy, and we've trained forest bathing guides to work in some of the most disadvantaged areas across Scotland in terms of inclusion and accessibility. So I think there's that need as well. You know, it's not just the people that are already accessing nature that we're promoting this work to. It's the people that there's various barriers in place and they might not be aware of the benefits. So the whole environmental justice, you know, that the communities that need it most have the access to good quality green space. So we might just go on to the final question before we get questions from the audience. So in terms of international policy or national policy, what do you think needs to happen to get nature-based solutions on the agenda in relation to national or international policy? So,
I can start.
Yes, Katsina.
From my perspective, the very important thing is social awareness, that it's not only, you know, emotional energy, esoteric something, but it's evidence-based medicine. And we need education, as Dermot said, not only for people who walk forest bathing walks, but also for university specialists. We need it on universities, for social workers or mental health workers. And I'm very happy to observe it because a few days ago we had annual psychiatric conference in Poland, which was a very big panel of ecotherapy as official psychiatry branch. So it's amazing. Also green prescriptions, a very nice thing. I had something like this here. It's a prescription for patient with seeds of the blooming meadow. If you don't have forest to go, you can have a little place, nature-like place at your place at home, but also places to go. Suburban forests, which are very important, not only like source of timber for industry, but also place where we can have benefits for our health. So I think these 3 points are pretty important.
Yes, Miles? Yes.
Yeah, in terms of policy ideas, I think there's a need to foster a culture of connecting with nature more widely across society, and I think that goes for mental well-being and for nature's well-being as well, and that can be from arts policy that celebrates nature and our relationship with nature being a standard metric for well-being assessments, as we've seen with the introduction of nature connection into the Gallup World Poll. I'd like to see the people uniting the well-being of people and nature. When we look at the biodiversity policies, they can be linked through to mental health policies as well, and to move beyond the simple provision of green space and access to nature to meaningful engagement with nature on everyone's doorstep through the design of urban spaces that prompt people to notice and engage and care for nature, opportunities for people to care for nature where they live, and finally an education policy that builds a lifelong relationship with nature, particularly during adolescence, where nature seems to leave, in the UK at least, leave our secondary schools and leave the curriculum somewhat.
And I think that came out in the poll that they're saying that the adolescents are maybe the group that needed most, you know, and sometimes they're, I suppose the focus really is on peer connection at that stage, you know, but to reintegrate them back into nature connection. And just want to highlight one of the European projects Katarzyna mentioned about training social workers or training. Green for Sea is a great Erasmus Plus funded project looking at developing competencies in different areas and training and education and support around this whole area. So I might just come to Pamela briefly, just in terms of, you know, leadership, and because I know it's very important to be able to influence at such a high level, Pamela. So can you see what needs to maybe happen to influence leadership at a global level in terms of the importance of this work?
Oh, I think, you know, what you're referring to is really a mindset shift. and the change of a paradigm. As you were just speaking a moment ago about the national, the international, at the policy level, it really goes to more inclusive measurements around prosperity that include mental health and social well-being, and to really make the move from international and national and organizational measures of strict economic performance that still take precedent and present an either-or paradigm between economic performance and social welfare. And so I think that that's really a fundamental starting point.
And Pamela, such a great range of experience and difference of thinking on the call, which is great. So we might go to our second poll. So Ben, if you want to put up the second poll just for the audience, it would be good to get some engagement there. And we're just going to go to the questions and answers now. So if any of the audience has a question for any of the panelists, maybe if you can put it in the questions and answers. So I see Aidan French, who is fantastic. We know Aidan well. He's a question for myself or Dermot. Given what you said, Shirley, reintegrating ecotherapy into health systems, have you lobbied government? Have you contacted Irish doctors for the environment? So that's a really interesting point, Aidan. So just before the lockdown, I presented on forest therapy to the Irish doctors for the environment about the importance of it and the research behind it. So I have done that, but I think that's where the partnerships and the networking and connections need to really happen on that level. So we might just invite any other questions just from the group. I see there's some questions in the chat as well. Any other questions that are coming up? Oh, great. So maybe while we're waiting just for the questions, I might just come back to Dermot and just maybe ask Dermot, what do you think needs to happen for the universities to maybe integrate the likes of forest therapy, forest ecotherapy into the curriculum?
And I think, as I said, I actually work as an external examiner at universities, and I'm also a lecturer on forest pathology and entomology. And I find that speaking to the students, when I take them on field trips and occasionally mention that I'm working with the UN on this whole area of green forest jobs, they are delighted that they go on a nature walk, that we talk about the ecosystem services associated with trees, the non-timber benefits. It's not just talking about cubic meters per hectare. It's about the what we used to call, when I was a forestry student, the imponderables that are now coming to fruition. And they sort of say, why is there not a specific course or even a degree, a master's degree, on the whole area of the non-timber benefits, the ecosystem services, the area of forest therapy, ecotherapy, all the things, the benefits of trees that are not just associated with timber production. And I think that should be highlighted. I think your different organizations, I mean, I'm fascinated by the network. When I see that there's about 1,000 people at this conference and so many speakers, there's a fantastic network. So I would suggest that maybe a declaration, or when at the end of a conference normally there are to-do points, I would suggest that this would be highlighted, that the whole concept of forest ecotherapy, as I call it, forest therapy, forest bathing, ecosystem services, should be part and parcel of a university course. I'll be taking that up with the forestry people in Ireland, and I think the feeling is that it's a fantastic addition, and it complements the suite of professionalism for us foresters. So that's what I say, Shirley. I think there should be a message going out from this conference that it should be part and parcel of a university course. It should, in fact, be part and parcel of every school child's curriculum. I remember as a child in school, we had a nature table. I was delighted to take in a bird's nest and place it on a table. And the teacher would sort of say, well done, what type of, and that gave me an insight into nature. So I think rather than just have a nature table in schools, perhaps And I think the poll showed that the younger the people are engaged with forest activities or blue or down by the sea, that they appreciate life better, they're not depressed, they have a happy disposition, and they feel they can go out and feel happy. And I make no apologies for saying this is what it's all about. I've met a lot of people who were depressed over COVID, but the antidote to their depression was a stroll in the woods, looking at the whole ecological cycle. So I would say get it involved. Let a message go out from this conference that the university should take this up as a module in their endeavours.
Great, thank you, Dermot. And maybe just a question from Miles. I think you highlighted earlier in relation to young people, maybe their connection to nature is not so strong. And what we know at the moment is that young people have been impacted by COVID to such a great extent, and there's real deterioration in terms of their mental health. Do you have any idea, Miles, about how we can strengthen the connection to nature for young people?
Yeah, I mean, there's not been enough research into the adolescent drop in nature connectedness and their close relationship with the natural world. And I think clearly partly it's going to be down to the changes that everybody goes through at that time, where social relationships become really important, and nature can take a back seat because nature isn't particularly cool when you're trying to form relationships with your peers. And the other half will be that nature disappears from secondary school in the UK. And I think it does come back to a wider awareness of nature playing a key role in managing our emotions, and that can come into the kind of aspects of schooling where people talk about well-being, that nature has a role, and that is in managing your well-being, managing your emotions, managing your moods, which are key things during adolescent years and into adulthood. And that comes back to the curriculum, as we've just been hearing, in secondary schools, and more programs that focus on adolescence. In the UK, most of the programs for children seem to focus on younger children, and I think there's been a real gap in focusing on teenagers and how best to engage them with the natural world in ways that they want to engage with the natural world.
Great. Thank you, Miles. And I think an interesting situation often arises when take people out on maybe forest bathing walks or forest therapy sessions, and some of the younger people might get distressed, when their level of nature connection increases and they're aware of what's happening to the planet. So it's a very interesting time, I think, to balance that, in terms of that eco-anxiety, eco-grief. Great. So just wanted to see if we have the results of the final poll. Just want to, maybe if we can post that, Ben, that would be great. And maybe just to sum up some of the key points, does any of the panelists maybe want to make a final point, just to sum up in terms of this session, or any final comments before we go to a close?
One point, as a forester, and I'd say us shy foresters are disinclined to talk about the unbelievable benefits the forests have in relation to the non-timber benefits. We're inclined to highlight the cubic meters, the timber production, and I think it's about time we went on the offensive and sort of said, listen, get out there in the woods, enjoy your share of fresh air, enjoy the environment, and economically, this is a fantastic asset to have that's not quantified in terms of economics. We call it, as students, imponderables. But I think the value of the forest or a marine ecosystem is a hell of a lot more in terms of, I found out during COVID, the fantastic potential and antidote that it provided from a mental point of view. And I think that's up to us now to encourage.
Fantastic, Dermot. I just see the results of the poll are in, and of course there could be, we asked what do you think are the barriers to implementing nature-based solutions for positive mental health, and the largest barrier I think is lack of awareness of benefits. So I think we should look at having community ambassadors, community champions for nature and well-being in all communities. Would be absolutely fantastic. Lack of evidence. So I think Miles touched on that. Sometimes randomized control trials are not as easy to do when you're dealing with nature, all the different variables. But in order to get taken seriously and to be integrated in the health system, further research needs to be done on this area. So just hand it over. Any final words from any of the panelists before I sum up? No? Great. Okay, so just want to thank everybody for joining this session. It was fantastic to get such a wide range of experiences, from the whole area of green jobs creation to the whole area on nature connectedness and research, practice, psychiatry practice, using forest bathing, and all the area around leadership and transformational thinking, consciousness shift. So thank you very much, and just wanted to thank all the panelists for giving their time today, and just to remind the audience that we're going to have 15 minutes break now, and then we are going to go back for the Communities of Practice 3, where we'll have sessions on landscape architecture and green spaces and all the different areas. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and this recording will be available next week. Okay, bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.